Hey YouTube, it's EricZombie again. How's everyone liking the new YouTube design? I thought since they released it yesterday it was an April Fool's joke, but apparently they decided to keep it around. So today I want to talk about information because I got into an argument with a guy online, or got into a debate with a guy on YouTube about genetic information. See, he claims that no new information can be added to a genome through the process of natural selection, because he's under the impression that natural selection culls genetic material from the genome, by selecting it or selecting against it. I was trying to explain to him that there is a huge difference between genetic information and genetic material. Now, it's funny, the animal on the face of the planet, there's one creature that has the largest genome, and that is an amoeba. It's actually a very simple, small creature, but it has a huge genome. Plenty more genes than it probably needs to have. Anyway, the point is, natural selection doesn't remove genetic information. It only selects for what is best in the organism's niche, whether it has more or less genetic information. Sometimes less genetic material could be more beneficial. Now, I stress that there is a big difference between information and material. Whatever this creationist meant, though, whether it was genetic information or genetic material, he was still wrong. And I'll show this by telling you the difference between material and information. Material, genetic material, is matter. It has mass. It's an actual substance. It's something that you can weigh, you can measure. Matter sticks to other matter. It follows physical properties. There are physical laws. Now, I don't want to say the word law, because I'm afraid that some creationist out there will say, well, who's the lawmaker? A law is a scientist's way of describing an intrinsic property of the universe, just like a theory is a scientist's way of describing a set of observable facts. Speaking of genetic matter, when DNA splits, usually the copies are exact, but nature isn't perfect. Sometimes during the splitting, segments are copied twice. Sometimes two chromosomes can be fused into one. For example, chimpanzees, along with all other higher apes, have 24 pairs of chromosomes. Humans only have 23 pairs. Now, it was speculated that at some point during our history, a shared ancestor between greater apes and humans had some offspring, and of those offspring, some of them had fused chromosomes. Now, later on, it was discovered that human chromosomes, the one particular human chromosome, which I believe is chromosome 3, has chimpanzee telomeres in the middle of it. Now, if you don't know what a telomere is, it's a genetic cap that's usually used to keep the chromosomes from unwinding. If you ask any idiot on the street what makes a human, besides our language, besides our use of tools, besides our culture, besides our emotional responses, which, by the way, all four of those have been shown in other living things, whales, chimpanzees, elephants, there's a lot of animals out there that show emotion. There are a lot of animals out there that use tools. But besides our overly developed cultural standards, what makes a human? And that would be 23 pairs of chromosomes. So, does that fact mean that children born with Down syndrome aren't human? They have an additional 21st chromosome. So, technically, they have an extra chromosome, which means that they don't have the 46 that's required to be human. I'm not saying that children with Down syndrome aren't human. I'm just saying, according to some people's standards, they wouldn't be. The difference between hierarchies, the differences between species, the difference between any two living things can be so ambiguous that it's difficult to tell one thing from another. there is no dividing point that says specifically this is one species and that is another species. At least there is no dividing point in time. If you look at any specific species nowadays, you're taking a snapshot of time. You're seeing the species as it is. Two living things may look similar on the outside, but they may have vast differences of genetic information on the inside, and it may lead to two separate different species sometime in the future. Code is merely a word that scientists use to describe patterns. See, and I hesitate to use the word code because it implies there is someone who is doing the coding, some kind of coder. The genetic code is something, it is information, but it's information that was refined through natural selection from an original random source. Nature is full of patterns, crystals, snowflakes, storms, sand dunes, waves, DNA. Anytime any physical matter is impacted by the laws of the universe, it can create patterns. Now, the point of my original argument is that information and material are different. So I'm going to have to define information here. And see, the definition of information can be different for everyone. Some people require that information have some kind of intellect behind it. Other people say information is just any kind of pattern. Now, since I'm saying that genetic material contains information, and I'm also saying that no intellect was required to create that information, I'm going to show you today how information can arise from random sources, following nothing but a couple simple intrinsic rules of the universe. The point is, creationists like to think of DNA the same way that a computer programmer would program code onto a hard disk. And that would be the difference between genetic material and genetic information. I guess the genes themselves would be the hard drive. But the information programmed on them, that would require what? A coder? A programmer? Now, I want to pretend that I have a universe here. Let's say I'm creating... I'm not going to be God, of course, because that would mean that people would have to worship me.